Good afternoon. It is July 18th, Thursday of the year 2019, and this is the next edition of the Torturers Rehabilitation Project. And just to start off with, I am being strafed right now from under the floorboards by at least two to four boys. They're hitting me all up and down each side of my back. They're hitting me in the groin as well, and occasional shots in the back of the left thigh and the center lower back. So I soldier on. About 2 months ago, I was being driven in a cab somewhere by a young man who's close in age to the boys and youths assaulting me with electrochemical weapons underneath my apartment in burrows and tunnels underground. And I explained to him what was happening, and his reaction was just like, without even thinking, just very sincere, wow, they must be really threatened by you. And that, who knows, what someone's motivations are, but that seems to correspond quite a lot with the many months, going on years now, that I had the opportunity to overhear their conversations and their motivations. And so today I'm going to focus on the very complex topic of vulnerability. And I want to start by just talking a little bit about human beings as a species. Ours is the only species that commits wholesale, almost warfare against the female gender, and includes huge percentages of abuse of children as well. And we're also the most helpless species when we are born, and require the most mothering and parenting and nurturing for us to grow up into well-balanced, healthy adults. And something very tragic has happened in this past generation, in that this incredible, in many ways, wonderful renaissance of technologies that empower us in so many ways, unfortunately, are so addictive and so ubiquitous, whether TV or cell phone or TV screen in every bar and airport, everywhere we go, we're surrounded by these technological gadgets that distract us. And what this has resulted in is tech companies are now moving into the primary caretakers and parents of children. And why is this so destructive? Well, first of all, our whole civilization is based on agreed upon rules and ethics that separate good behavior from bad behavior, healthy, good for the community behavior versus destructive, tearing community, society, and civilization apart behavior. And so when the kids are constantly sucked into these devices, they're not getting that very important imprinting from their culture and their community. They're getting the culture of greed and selfishness, which is the foundation of capitalist culture, which is the money-making machine. And that and they're very in bed with the military-industrial complex, who has all sorts of reasons to perpetuate violence as a sexual pursuit. And war is sexy, can be a real man and go off and kill people. And so all that's coming back home to roost as these children grow up. Part of developing a healthy, well-balanced, mature adulthood is the ability to interact effectively with other people. And when these kids are always absorbed into these devices or remote game playing, they're not getting this really important face-to-face interaction where you try to communicate and you make mistakes and you fail, and you go back and you think about, why was I humiliated, embarrassed, bullied? Why was I mean? What do I feel about it? What are my emotions around that? Boom, right there. That's learning about vulnerability, and that is key and central to own vulnerability, to learn how to work with the ways that we are sensitive and open and exposed, and with that comes understanding intimacy, which is crucial for relationships, especially our closest relationships, our closest friendships, our relationships we have with family, and ultimately with our lovers. And so the stifling, the cutting off of these really vital cognitive development processes in these teenagers has now metastasized into this horrible nightmare that's happening to me personally, where these kids, they've got their poison canisters, they attach a weapon to it, they put on their wall-penetrating visual devices, and then rather than exploring feelings of intimacy and sexuality, whether it's masturbation or learning to have the first sort of tender contacts firsthand with someone that they're attracted to, the weapon shot up through the ceiling and at me, the victim, has become the penis. And so other than, rather than a young male as he grows into his sexuality reinforces the positive aspects of being a male and having a penis, and the sexual enjoyment that comes from that, with a release, and then the good hormones that happen there, and the feelings of relief and prowess and back to balance. These guys are holding on to their weapon like it's a penis, and that is emasculating them right there. That's saying right there that your biological part of your body is less valuable and important to you than this weapon. And so there's right then that feeling of low self-esteem keeps getting a feedback loop in them. They're caught up in this fantasy about this person who can't even see their faces, and they're assaulting and they're attacking over and over again. And so again, there's that further reinforcement of detachment and lack of ability to know how to function in a healthy way in the presence of somebody of the opposite sex. So now what happens is rather than the exploring of sexuality and the release and the back to balance, the weapon becomes more, as I mentioned before, a source of addiction, and it's like getting a shot of heroin or something. You try the drug for the first time, it's very thrilling, it's exciting, you come down off of it, you feel hollowed out, empty, and life is never quite the same until you go back for that next hit of heroin. And what happens is each time you go back for the hit, there's not as much of the gratification as there was the first time. And so that's where the really serious addiction comes in, and you keep going back and you keep going back because that's the only thing now that gives you that pleasure firing, but it's all a lie, and it's putting your body further and further out of whack with the hormones. It's interrupting your cognitive ability to think. What happens in this case, especially with young men, is because it's a weapon and they're shooting and they're assaulting, they're firing up their aggressive parts of the brain all the time instead of the sensual, intimate, loving parts of the brain. And the center of where our anger and fear comes from is, they call it the reptile part of the brain, which is the most primitive part. And then the higher centers of the brain that evolved later in our species have to do more with the warm emotions of love and compassion and sensitivity. And then the highest evolution of brain capacity has to do with analytical thinking and perception of the self. So now they're down in the reptile brain. They're no longer in control of a good part of their mind. And that part of the mind is not going to be, the brain itself is not going to be fully developed with all the synapses forming, etc., until early 20s. And then there's some studies show that we can keep developing aspects of our brain for our whole lives, but really rapid, drastic development is happening in the human brain until the early 20s. And so what they're doing is they're not only blocking and stuffing down their processes to help them become healthy, emotional, mature people, but they're also actually warping their own minds and atrophying their own minds. And so that's the kind of humans that this technological society is producing at a really rapid rate, and women have to contend with this as well. We're better at it. We're more naturally open to feelings of vulnerability and sensitivity. That's more tied to our sort of sexuality and how the female of our species has evolved. But it's a real problem with the men. And and so these men, they just keep coming back, and and here we come back to the vulnerability part. If you cannot resolve, I did a little blurb last night when I was talking about all my stumbles in my adolescence up to my finally having a sex at the age of 18, and at that point I had been so bullied, and I was always the picked on child, and just wounded in a lot of ways emotionally by family and peers, and so I just went through a time where I couldn't feel that vulnerability. I was exploring my sexuality, but it was not attached to my heart, and it took me some years to resolve that and become a better, more loving person and able to have a better relationship with other people as a result. So that's all being blocked down. If you're gonna attack somebody, if you feel the need to attack somebody or harm another human being, it's because there's something in you, an impulse that's causing you to want to do that, and to think that's going to solve a problem. Well, I would suggest that the reason why you're doing that is that you've got all this unresolved pain that you're not getting the proper tools to deal with, and it's much easier for you just to put a weapon in your hand and shoot at a woman and project your problems and your anger and your rage and your feelings of the world being unfair at somebody else, rather than you looking inside and seeing this pain and saying, there's a lot of pain here, in here, and I'm not going to solve that pain by shooting it at somebody else, And so I really recommend for these boys that are caught up in this addiction, for all young kids, at least for a couple hours in the day, you can break it up if you want to, get away from the technology. And I really recommend doing things like martial arts. There's Qigong, there's Aikido, there's Tai Chi. They're the non-aggressive arts if you're not into that, or if you really want to learn how to fight. There's of course karate and kung fu and jiu-jitsu, and the great thing about the martial arts is that they really and yoga is that they really incorporate mind, body, spirit, and get the energy in your body realigned so that you can get in touch with empowerment in these areas that I'm talking about, to get in touch with your vulnerability in your heart and to heal the wounds so that you don't feel a need to attack you'll feel the need instead to go and have a conversation, or say, I'm sad, and have somebody help you by talking or embracing or loving you. That's what you should be learning, rather than wasting your time just knee-jerk. At any time you feel rage, you pick up a weapon and shoot somebody. That's not going to help you to develop the way you have to survive as a healthy, well-balanced human being. All right, I could go on a lot longer on this topic. I think I'll leave it off for here. Maybe I'll do vulnerability part 2 tomorrow. Okay, spend some time with yourself today, folks. Just being still, just thinking, looking out at nature, and just see what comes up for you. Okay? All right, take care. Good luck with it.